Hello and welcome back to Learn It from a Layman. I am Carl Christensen. I am joined today by Dr. Erika Handly, first time guest on the podcast. Welcome, Erika.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We're excited to have you to talk today about biotech, bioengineering, all of the things that you know about a lot about, which, as we discussed briefly before the podcast, you wouldn't necessarily think from Learn It from a Layman that we'd have a doctorate come on and talk about the things that you know about, but it's mostly for my education. I mean, let's be real. Um, but yeah, Erika, your background, you got a degree in chemical engineering, right? And then moved on to MIT, where you got your doctorate in bioengineering.
Yeah.
And what are you doing right now?
I'm working at a law firm, so I help with the patent prosecutions of biotech patents.
Oh,
So
nice.
I
Okay.
work part-time.
Okay. Cool. Well, we're excited. We've done law podcasts in the past, but we didn't talk about biotech. So we'll stay away from the law subjects and talk more about the biotech stuff. And I guess that's the place to really start off here is as a layman myself. I don't. I mean, I've heard biotech. I live in close to San Diego. Lived in San Diego for a long time. Had a lot of friends work in biotech. It sounds cool, but like that's obviously biology and technology. Is biotech using technology to understand biology, or is it using technology to fix biology?
Yeah, so that's a good question to start. I would say it's both. So you're using different technologies to understand like different mechanisms in the body. And then you're also using these same technologies to try and fix biology for like cancer and diseases. And then I would also add that it's using biology as a technology as well. Um,
Hmm.
and so, for like some examples of that, you have like the CRISPR technology, which is using this bacteria immune defense. So, like harnessing that for gene editing, or using like um, bacteria and stuff to like clean up oil spills. That would also be like considered the biotech field as well.
Well, that sounds like a specific example to me. That's interesting. Maybe
Yeah.
we can visit that one later. Okay, so what are the types of problems? So you just mentioned one specific one. But what are the types of problems that biotech is being used to solve?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot, and it covers a really broad spectrum. The most familiar to most people would probably be like disease biology or some sort of prosthetic or something. So understanding drug mechanisms, understanding diseases, so that you can treat people better. So that's a really heavy emphasis in the field. Biotech's really heavily used also in agriculture. So we're trying to like decrease pesticides use. So you um, modify the different plants so that you don't need to use as much pesticide, or make them just grow better in drought conditions, or yeah, just more robustly.
Right.
Um, yeah, as mentioned, they're used in oil spills. You also, there's a really cool application of biology in batteries. They can use viruses to make batteries. Um, DNA as a storage device is cool. And if you've ever been to PetSmart recently, they have like a bunch of fluorescent fish. And so they've been modifying even pets with
Wow.
the biotech field.
Fluorescent fish.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of fun. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, it's like a naturally occurring jellyfish, like
oh, okay.
gene, and then they've like inserted it into a bunch of different animals. And so now you can go buy a genetically modified pet. Um,
That's
just at
crazy.
local PetSmart, and they're pretty cheap. They're like $5.
Wow. Or when do we get fluorescent cats? Can we get one of those?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but
Okay.
I'm sure someone's tried it.
Right. Right.
One person in a neighboring lab once, so we use the GFP, the green fluorescent protein, a lot in the lab. They had accidentally like gotten some virus into their skin, and then they could actually see it if they used a, a light on it. So
Oh
they were
my.
glowing a little bit, just like a little patch of their skin.
That's how Spider-Man got started, right? Somebody.
Yeah. someone accidentally like got a little bit of virus on them or something.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fun. Um, you also mentioned something about viruses and batteries. That sounds like a combination of like the Matrix and I Am Legend or something like that. I mean, like some type of dystopian like. Is that something that you're familiar? Like, do you know the specifics? How does that work? How do you turn a virus into a battery? I mean, that's
So, yeah, I'm not super familiar with
okay.
the actual biology, but it was in the same building as me. It was Dr. Angela Belcher's lab at MIT. Basically, so viruses are really good at having like DNA, well, like a small packet of DNA inside them and then replicating that DNA. And so they can insert that into bacteria and then just make a lot of that DNA. And so what they would do is they would program the DNA to like attract different ions. And so then they could form a more like a organized structure using these viruses to make the
Wow.
different electrodes.
Okay.
So it's pretty cool to look into,
Yeah,
and
that's
I don't
amazing.
understand batteries that well, so
Sure.
some of that terminology escapes me.
That's fine.
But yeah, it's supposed the logic behind using viruses is battery production is quite like eco unfriendly. So if you use viruses, you can do it at room temperature, and
Oh,
the cleanup is easier. So uh,
wow. Okay, so
they
that's
haven't been
very
able to
different.
scale that up yet to be
Mm,
like industrially relevant. But there
sure.
might be certain applications where a virus battery would be useful.
Okay. Sounds super interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk. I mean, there's a lot of things in this field that are really interesting. I know that one that the layman has heard of, and I know that because I've heard of it, is CRISPR. Um, and that's something that you have familiarity with, right? So what is CRISPR, if you were explaining it to someone like me?
Okay. So CRISPR, the acronym stands for Clustered Regular Interspersed Palindromic Repeats,
Which is
which
why we
doesn't
call
mean
it
very
CRISPR.
much. Which doesn't mean very much to even anyone. They just really wanted a cool acronym.
Okay.
It's basically so bacteria cells have an immune system just like humans do. Um, and how these normally work is the immune system recognizes something as being pathogenic, and then they'll attack it. And so how these bacteria do it is they insert the DNA like fragments, and they store those somewhere, and so that they can recognize those if they come again, to destroy them. And so basically, the CRISPR system is isolating that immune system, and using it in different gene editing capacities, because these components of the defense system are really good at recognizing very specific sequences of DNA. So you can give them a little piece of DNA, and yeah, use this defense mechanism to target a very specific portion of the DNA, and then they'll make a cut. And then you can do a lot of things with that different cut. You can like insert a section of DNA that you want, very specifically, or um, how it works traditionally is it just keeps cutting the same spot over and over. And our DNA repair system isn't perfect. It's very prone to error. And so eventually they'll introduce a mutation there, and that will disrupt the sequence, so that it no longer reads what was originally there.
Okay. Okay. Um, yeah, it seems like you said, that there's a lot of variables at play here as far as like, it's a very complicated system. What are how predictable are the outcomes of doing that type of editing of your DNA?
So CRISPR is really good. And so there were gene editing technologies before CRISPR, for a few decades, but they were just really
Oh, wow.
difficult to use, and they were, yeah, much more prone to error. CRISPR is very specific. Um, and so I did a lot of CRISPR in the lab. And so yeah, I like it's like 100% for in terms of hitting your targets that you want. And it's based on how specific of a DNA sequence you can get that targets whatever gene of interest you want. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, it's pretty good.
So the targets that you're talking about, so those, are we trying to fix disease? Are we trying, I mean, what did you use it for?
So I was studying ovarian cancer and I was looking at genes that would sensitize ovarian cancer to different platinum agents.
Hmm.
So basically, I did a huge screen. And so, looking at all about 20,000 genes in the human genome, um, and you basically have little DNA segments for each of those genes that you want to target. And then you can test them all at the same time using this like pooled screening technology. Um, like without getting into like the super nitty
Right,
gritty,
right.
there's ways that you test these different gene sequences to make sure they're actually targeting the gene you want, and you use a lot of repetition and target different parts of the gene, so that you are making sure that you're actually hitting the gene that you're interested in.
Wow.
Um,
Okay. So active research is being done in CRISPR, like, I mean, just all the time still, then.
Yeah, I would say CRISPR is used so heavily in almost like any biology lab you go into because it's so robust and
Hmm.
it's pretty easy to use too. It's pretty easy to manipulate the system. And they've so the first CRISPR that they isolated was from one particular bacteria, and then now they've isolated many more systems from different bacteria, and they have different capabilities and different specificities and stuff. So it's just this like rapidly expanding technology that is really useful in the lab.
Okay. That's, yeah, I mean, it, I've assumed that because it's something that the layman has heard of before, it's something that is, a little bit more widespread than a lot of the things that you know about that the layman doesn't. But yeah, that's it's nice to have the specifics of kind of what it does. All right, so potentially changing gears, though, as a layman, I don't even know if I'm changing. What? How is biotech used? You mentioned you can be used in like oil spill cleanups, but like how does biotech help solve like climate change or famine, those types of things?
Um, so how is biotech helping? Biotech can do a little bit with the climate change. I would still say that there needs to be more of a like cultural and political movement in order to make more rapid responses to the climate change.
Sure.
But there are technologies that people are working on to like clean the air, take pollutants out of the air. So a filtering device there. There's people that are working on using different bacteria to like eat plastics to digest those plastics that we are producing at quite a high rate. And then, so famine that falls under the category of like the agricultural
Mm,
biotech sphere, and they're making plants that can be more drought resistant or that can grow in different climates than what they're supposed to, or just grow more robustly or produce more food. So that's really useful, and I know they send a lot of things to like Africa and India to help with like the drought conditions,
right.
things that can grow a little bit more robustly in those conditions.
Okay. What everyone's heard a GMO before. Um, what is the M? Like is that biotech M, or is that like outside of the sphere of biotech?
Like, what do you mean the M?
The M as like, so GMO, so genetically modified, right?
Organism, yeah.
And are right. So are they these fruits, vegetables, whatever they are, whatever these food products are that are GMO'd, are they modified using biotechnology, or is this just traditional biology and people are doing, swapping different, you know, genes using some other, more basic technology? Do you know much about biotech in that sphere?
Yeah, so they definitely do the traditional inserting DNA into seeds, and like taking out different genes as well, using just what like almost the same techniques that I did in the lab, a little bit different because you're working with seeds instead of like mammalian cells.
Mm,
So they definitely do biotech. on plants. They
Okay.
also have done the very traditional, more slower genetically modified organisms where you do breeding of
Right.
pairs to get the desired traits. And those that takes longer, but that's been done since the onset
Right.
of farming.
Yes, exactly. That I guess that's what I when I said traditional, that's kind of what I was thinking. Yeah, is just back in however we got boysenberries or whatever the heck that means. But yeah, so you're saying that in the lab there at MIT or whatever, you knew people that did their work directly on plants.
I actually don't know any. I worked in a very like cancer dedicated center.
Okay.
It did have some crossover with like I mentioned, like the batteries were in there, and there were some other people working on different climate things. So I didn't know anyone working on plants, but I've heard of talks and things of people
Okay.
doing work on that. So yeah,
Okay.
and I've
But
helped people. Some people write like patents on them too. So
nice.
I
Okay.
guess I've seen some of it.
Okay. Can I? You've mentioned the oil spill at the beginning of the podcast. How does bacteria help with cleaning up an oil spill?
So basically, it's digesting the oil. Um, there's bacteria that already consume oil. They like live by where oil is like coming out from the ocean and stuff. So they just either take those and use them directly, or they modify them just a little bit and then use them on an oil spill on the surface to try to clean it up faster.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty awesome. Uh,
Yeah,
okay,
bacteria are pretty good at like eating all of the random things. They don't, and they're pretty clean technologies. So
sure, sure.
yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean, that sounds like a great solution then to a human caused problem. So,
yeah.
um, okay, well, what about old technology? So something like a pacemaker. Pacemakers have been around for a decade, I mean, a long time, right? Are those something that is considered biotech? Is that something that like you learned about or something that's like has ongoing work done on it?
So I asked Seth about this one because he sees a lot more of the medical devices than I do. And so pacemakers would still be considered biotech. I don't think anything ever like ages out of that. Uh,
Okay.
but they are being improved constantly. So now pacemakers are smaller. They can be attached to a little monitor or a little remote, and there's like apps on your phone that will show you how they're functioning. So they've integrated a lot more of the technologies into them instead of just being a device that
Okay.
helps your heart pump.
It's probably be a good point. I never mentioned before, Erica, you are married to Seth, who did a podcast with us a couple podcasts ago about anesthesiology. So there's
Yeah,
a lot of knowledge in the household there.
yeah, yeah. He definitely sees a lot more of the actual applications of these technologies
Right,
than I
right.
do.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about microchips. Implantable microchips are a bit of a rage right now, obviously, with I think it was recently done on a human for the first time, right? They installed a microchip in somebody's brain. Um, is that inevitable, Erica, as far as like having microchips implanted into people in the future?
I actually haven't heard about the microchip that was implanted into someone's brain.
Oh, I
Um,
think it was Neuralink, right? Are you familiar with Neuralink?
mm-mm.
Okay. Anyway, I, it's a technology I assume that you've heard of and have
Mhm.
potentially studied before. Is that something that you think is going to be useful in the future?
I think it is already kind of used if you think about like cochlear implants to help people
Mm,
hear. That's like
right.
an implanted microchip. Vision is currently being worked on. And so probably that's gonna be a thing pretty soon as well to help people see. So I think anything with the senses is going to be fixed with microchips pretty soon. But maybe like something that you could like implant in your head and like teaches you a different language or something. I think that sounds a little bit like it's not, to me it sounds a little far-fetched. Maybe it is
Sure.
the dream of sci-fi. And I don't think it's inevitable because I think there's going to be a lot of like backlash politically
Right.
against something like that. And so yeah, I don't think it's going to become common or widespread, but definitely to help like with prosthetics functioning or something like that. Those things are all going to be microchipped like pretty
Sure.
soon in the future.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I as a layman, I think your impulse is right. Like I think that people just general, unless you need it for, like you said, like some type of a sense, people don't necessarily want electronics installed in their body. Um, and I
Yeah.
don't know that that will change in the near future for sure. Did you ever study anything like that as far as like what the disadvantages, like if there are implants, like what are considerations people need to have, like what happens when you install electronics in a human?
Um, well, the main thing that you've probably seen is like when you go through an airport, you can't go through the scanners anymore. Any sort of magnet around electronics is going to be pretty dangerous. And so, like, if you needed an emergency MRI, like, you can't get it. Like, you would
Mm,
have to like surgically remove the device before something like that, you know?
sure.
So that's like the most like obvious thing. But there's other um like more probably more minor considerations is like anytime you implant something foreign into the body, there's a chance of infection or rejections as your body try like adapts to that thing in your body. um, the device electronics can fail, and so having something in your like a pacemaker is very very important that it doesn't fail.
Right.
But it could because it's an electronic. They try to make sure it doesn't, but um, that's always a concern. um, and then, yeah, so the immune reactions to the foreign body already discussed. Yeah, device failure. And then there's also like not really proven, but there's some research saying like, if you like hold your like cell phone like too close to your brain, like too
Mm,
long or something, that can start having like some issues as well. So maybe having electronic implanted in your in anywhere near your brain or something, maybe that would have an effect on you. There, I haven't really seen any research to like really validate that concern,
okay.
um, but it's definitely been thought about.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it seems like, and I know this is something people are concerned about with, the widespread use of Wi-Fi connected technology in homes and stuff like that. If you have electronics installed in you and it's connected to the internet in any fashion, which has to be a step that we're moving towards, right? Then
Mhm.
it's hackable, right? Or I mean, it doesn't even, I guess, have to be connected to the internet to be hackable. But anytime you bring electronics into play, you could potentially try to use that. And so, I mean, I don't know if anyone's around trying to hack people's, implants, but that's got to be a concern going forward potentially if more people have these installed, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a concern with electronics. And yeah, hackers are really good. So if you make the device more complex and capable of more things, then it's also capable of more abuse.
Right, right,
So
yeah. Okay, well, yeah. I mean, but I guess the solace we can give to the layman is, like you said, this isn't something that's going to necessarily control our minds in the near future, at least. So,
yeah, not anything I've seen. Um, yeah, and that really does feel like a sci-fi dream because it'd be so nice if you could like put a chip in, being like, "Oh, I want to know all about," you wouldn't have to do this
right,
podcast. You'd be like, "I want to know all about biotech. I'm gonna put this biotech chip in my head."
right,
So
yeah. I mean, I've heard predictions, and like I said, my gut layman impression is, I don't know if you know who Ray Kurzweil is, but he's like this futurist guy that's made predictions in the past that have come to fruition. But he made some prediction about having some implantable chip, I think. And I don't remember what the date was, but I was like, I just don't think that humans want it enough. At least not widespread, adoption. Maybe there's a tiny segment of the population, but even then, I think that there's biology is messy, right? And it's not
yeah,
always entirely clear how that would work. So.
yeah.
Okay, well, that's my layman pontification for now. Let's move back to some knowledge. I guess let's focus in more on what your specific, research and work was. Tell us a little bit about the biggest advancements in biotech for cancer and what those look like.
So the biggest advance is probably the immune therapies, if you've heard about that. So basically, one of the things that cancer is really good about is evading your immune system, because anytime a cell mutates in your body or it's a little bit off, normally it's either supposed to go through like a self-programmed, called apoptosis, but it's a self-programmed killing of itself, or it's supposed to be killed by your immune system. So cancer is really good at evading the immune system in your body. And so a big push in the field of cancer biology is to like reactivate the immune system or make the immune system recognize your cancer in some way, so that it actually can get rid of it like it's supposed to. Um, and that therapy has been really effective for like a small portion of the population. So it doesn't work for everyone, but the people it does work for, they're like cured, which is it's really nice to see. Um, Another advance in the field is different combination treatments. There's a lot of combination treatments that are already being used for cancer that are pretty effective, and just figuring out new combinations. And in relation to that, combination treatment is like personalized therapies. So basically, looking at the different mutations that your cancer has, and then trying to concoct like a very specific um, mix of chemos or mix of different therapies in order to target that specific cancer that you have. Um, Another thing that was worked on in my building was nanoparticles. And so that is just trying to decrease the side effects of cancer treatments, because these cancer treatments are pretty much poison to all of your normal cells as well.
Right.
So sometimes you can encapsulate these cancer treatments in different nanoparticles, and then you can activate them when they're right at the cancer site,
Mm.
so that you get like a decreased systemic response to these treatments. So you can activate them with like heat, with light, um, with gamma radiation and things. So those are all some of the tools that are kind of the advancement of the cancer research there.
Do we know why, like you said, like some of these technologies, some of these treatments seem to be very, you said they essentially cure some people, but they don't work for other people.
Hmm.
Do we understand why?
So with the immune therapies, I would say they don't quite know why yet.
Mm.
But with other cancers, they do. You can, if you ever heard of like triple negative breast cancer, it's the worst one because they don't have any of the mutations that are more easily treatable, or at least we like have known therapies for them. Um, so sometimes you can like genotype the cancer and you can understand why a therapy would work or wouldn't work. And a lot of the other times it's a lot of guesswork, and
Mm.
you don't really know if you're going to respond until after you have the like really rotten chemo sequence. So that's a frustration, and that's where the personalized therapies are trying to make strides so that you can check your cancer beforehand to see if some of these therapies are going to work.
Okay, so you mentioned breast cancer there, and you said, I believe you said that you've done research on ovarian cancer. Are
Hmm.
there particular cancers that are more targetable, and what makes a particular cancer more likely to be treatable?
So what makes cancer likely to be treatable? If they haven't metastasized and they're very localized, that's
Yeah.
normally easier to treat. And there are certain cancers that are very treatable with chemos. So testicular cancer is the cancer that normally people say when they're talking about like the effectiveness of chemo, because almost all testicular cancers are cured if you
Mm.
use like a cisplatin, and because they're really prone to they have really bad DNA repair, this particular cancer. And so cisplatin really is good at being effective on these like really faulty DNA repair cancers.
Okay.
And so they're almost like 100% curable with this drug.
Mm.
Um, so it just really depends on the cancer. And yeah, I'm kind of lost my train of thought to say like what was the initial question, but like
I was just, like you said, I have breast cancer, ovarian cancer, you mentioned now testicular cancer. Um,
Mhm.
just I guess as a layman and from the point of biotech, like what makes them more treatable? I mean, yeah, I mean, metastasis. I can't even, I don't say
Yeah,
the
if a
word.
cancer has metastasized,
Right,
it's
there it is.
normally much harder to treat because
Right,
it's
but
changed. So
okay,
metastasis is the cancer has mutated and now it's mobile, and and either it goes through the bloodstream or it just starts like moving around, and that means that a lot of mutations have occurred, and so it's much harder to treat this really broad mutation spectrum,
okay.
instead of like a more localized, just like a few mutations form this cancer.
So the work that you did on ovarian cancer, is that so the therapies that you were trying to create, are those considered a chemo then, a chemo type treatment?
What I was studying was chemo. So cisplatin and oxaliplatin are chemos that are
Okay.
used frontline for ovarian cancer. And so I was just trying to find different combinations to pair with those frontline chemos,
Mm,
um, in order to make them more effective. Because ovarian cancer, almost all of them, at least the type I was working on, which is high grade serous carcinomas, but they responded really well to platinum therapies. And normally people got like 3 to 5 years from these therapies, but then there was relapse. And
mm,
the relapses were really difficult to treat. And it was very, most people like had reoccurrence.
mm.
So just trying to make those responses more durable
Okay.
was what I was working on for ovarian cancer.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, imagine that biotech and cancer has to be a big field in the commercial world as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, outside, obviously, you did your work at MIT. I'd imagine that's something that just cancer is ubiquitous, and that's something that I'd imagine that there's a big market for being able to find treatments. So uh, we can, I guess, leave it there. I mean, maybe we can one follow-up question later. But what are the biggest wins essentially in the biotech world in general for improving human health?
um I would say the biggest wins are, I don't know now. For improving human health, I would say like the agricultural changes that we've done have been really
Okay.
amazing. Just making sure that there's like a dedicated food source that's very
Hmm.
consistent. Um, I think that's where biotech has helped the most. They've obviously done a lot with health, with disease biology as well. Um, and I guess maybe I'm a little bit jaded because I did work in the cancer sphere where it always feels um, like if when you listen to talks, it always feels like, okay, everyone, like we've come to the solution, we find like we've made it. But there's so many different types of cancer, and there's so many um, different
Right.
problems that still need to be overcome in that sphere that it feels like you're really making little micro steps. But maybe that's just because I was
Right.
too deep in the research there that I didn't see like some of the broader um,
Sure.
that were happening.
So you're, like I said, you got a degree in chemical engineering and then bioengineering. Bioengineering seems like it probably has to be a relatively recent doctorate. Like I mean, as far as like decades go, like are these biotech degrees, bioengineering, are these relatively recent programs as far as like maybe 20 years old or what? Is this a field that's been around for longer than a layman like me thinks it has?
No, it's a relatively new degree for sure. Um, I think the biological engineering program at MIT um, was established in the early 2000. Oh no,
Okay,
19.
yeah,
Um, so pretty early, but it was converted over from like the food science department,
hmm,
which was already doing some biotech work. It just wasn't specifically called like an engineering field yet.
okay,
But there still is a lot of disparity in what type of like bioengineering you're getting from any
right,
specific school. Like some schools really focus on the biomedical, some schools focus more on um, like what is it called, like prosthetics and like more biomechanical things. And so MIT called it biological engineering to try to encompass all of these different fields a little bit more, because
Oh,
they had
all
they
right.
had like, the batteries and the climate change stuff. But if you saw a resume with someone with bioengineering on it, you kind of don't know what they studied. Since it is like still relatively new, there's not this like set curriculum. Like chemical engineering, like everyone knows kind of what you studied. So it's still,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, well, that's. I mean, I knew. So Erica, just inside, you married Seth, who is my cousin, and so I had heard that you had this background, and so I wanted to have you on the podcast, but I didn't actually know like what like bioengineering, like you said. I was like, I actually don't know what Erica's work was in. So I like you said, it seems like it's a relatively wide field. I'm kind of going out of order here in the question. Sorry, Erica, but the educational background you came from chemical, but people,
Mhm.
I'd imagine, can come from a couple different fields, right?
Yeah, people can come from mechanical, people can come from electrical. Normally they come with some engineering background,
Right.
um, but some people come from just straight biology. So
Mm.
you can come to it from any any direction. It feels like.
And it's, I mean, it seems like it's mostly a higher, like biotech specifically, or bioengineering. Is it like a master's or a doctoral level degree? Are there undergrad degrees in biotechnology or something?
Some schools offer the undergrad degree. BYU didn't. And so I kind of made my own bioengineering degree when I was there. Like I took the pre-med coursework with chemical engineering, so I would have like a little bit more bio.
Sure.
And the reasoning behind why BYU doesn't offer the bioengineering is because people don't know what you studied. And so sometimes that's a problem. You
Right.
have to like really dig into their coursework to figure out like what do they actually know, because there's just not a
Sure.
standardized curriculum yet
Okay.
for it. And also the jobs for an undergrad for like a bioengineering are much more limited. And
Mm.
most, like at least most of the jobs that I would be looking at for like a pharmaceutical company, you would be like a lab tech. So you wouldn't be doing any of your own like thought if you only went with an undergrad. You still could do good work, obviously, but you wouldn't be doing most of the research or leading the research.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. The educational background is something that's interesting to me because, like I said, specifically for this podcast alone, like I mean, I knew your degree, but I didn't know what you studied, and like the coworkers, people I knew before, friends that I had in San Diego that had the biotech feel like I didn't know what their, I work in biotech. I was like, well, I mean, I don't know what that means, but that's awesome.
Yeah, it's very broad. Can work in a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
things.
Okay. All right. Well, let's hit two more of these kind of layman familiarity items before we sign off here. But I read an article, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months, maybe it was a year ago now, about reversing aging in mice. Um, and that seemed pretty cool. I was like, well, that's got to be coming to humans right away then, right? What are you familiar with technology about reversing aging, and is that something that's going to be doable?
Um, so yeah, I went to this talk and it was super interesting. But these people, they hooked like an old mouse to a young mouse, like with a tube in between them so that their blood would like transfuse in between. It's like really nasty. I don't know how that's like an allowed experiment, but it was.
Right.
And it did. It showed that these older mice like had some of these factors of aging like reversed or at least slowed down. And so if you've heard of like the Silicon Valley vampires that started like transfusing blood in of like young people into them to, try to stay young forever, they really like jumped on this theory pretty quickly. I would say in general, technology probably can't reverse aging, but it can probably slow it down. So
Okay.
um, quite a bit. So that,
It
yeah.
it does seem wild, but yeah, I mean all the switching of blood, and I swear I read something about like gut like being able to transplant like fecal matter essentially,
Oh,
right? Is
yeah,
that
yeah. That one is like a, yeah, thriving technology. It's pretty easy to do. But yeah, you can change your gut microbiome by like taking a pill of someone else's like fecal microbiome.
Oh my gosh. It
Yeah.
sounds like a
And
nightmare.
like sometimes that's actually like all someone needs is they just need to like repopulate their gut microbiome with
Mm.
something that works a little bit more robustly, and it solves some problems pretty easily. And like it sounds really gross, but it's been really useful.
Okay. Okay. So
That's
you're
in
saying
a
there's
study where
good science behind it. Okay.
yeah, there's that, and obviously once they've like distilled it down to just the bacteria, then you're just taking a pill of
Right.
bacteria.
Right, right.
Yeah,
It's if to the layman, it does sound horrible, the idea of
yeah,
like fecal matter, microbiome stuff or whatever. But I mean, it's technology. They've done a good job isolating what they need to, right? You're not just eating poop.
yeah. You're not eating poop. But I think the early studies might have been like, just taking probably from a mouse, but like poop to a poop and
Right,
seeing what
right.
happens. And it makes a big difference what bacteria you have down there. So
Crazy.
that's a big area in biotech as well.
Hmm, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the last one, and it does seem like it's all the rage, right? Like I've asked some of our previous guests about like how AI affects their fields. AI, really has exploded onto the scene the last few years, even. What AI technologies are being, how is AI being used in biotech right now?
So AI is being used to like analyze large screen sets. So building like connections, building these like neural networks to figure out what is connected with different things. Computational modeling of biological systems is really big, especially like predicting like drug response, because it's really hard to predict like what's going to happen with the whole body, all of these interactions that are occurring. So AI is useful in trying to predict like all of the different interactions that are going to happen. Protein folding is also a really big one. How are these like because we know the sequences of proteins because it's like based on the DNA, but how they actually fold once they're produced is like really a very complex question. And so AI is very helpful in trying to predict what structures actually form there. It's very like computationally like heavy work. So that's something big. Something that's like kind of to the dismay of the community is AI has also been really good at writing papers. And so it's hard to figure out which research is like
Right,
unique instead of something that was just generated by a computer system. And it's actually pretty hard to discern which ones are good and not. So it's also creating a little bit
right.
of muddling in the community. Yeah.
Okay. So it can be useful, but can also be obnoxious, is what we're
Yeah,
saying.
it's also obnoxious.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's obviously a lot of potential and people are just starting to use it in different areas. But so one other thing before we finish, Erica, I had a cousin on my other side of the family on a number of, it's been more than a year ago. I don't remember. And he talked about his research. Um, and he's doing, I think, post-grad work at UC Berkeley right now. And for the life of me at this moment, I don't even remember what he's doing. It's some type of molecular level analysis of, I don't know. It's something that a layman doesn't talk about anyway. But we had him on. We talked about it, and he texted our podcast thread recently and said that he got a job offer based on the podcast that we had done. Like someone had listened,
Oh, really?
which is wild. He said that somebody reached out to him and said, "Hey, I really enjoyed your podcast on Learn It From a Layman about this subject. Would you be interested?" And I was like, "This is wild. This is crazy." I mean, but if there was someone listening out there, Erica, what does the future hold for you? What are you going to be? Is what interests you, and what areas are you going to be exploring in the future?
So that is a really good question. I don't know what I want to do. Right now, I am working at a law firm and I help people write their patents for their own inventions. And that's pretty interesting because you get a really broad spectrum of like what are people doing in the biotech field instead of being so narrow. I went into my PhD really passionate about cancer research, and maybe that's an area that I'll go back to someday, and that would be that would be really cool too, and I would like to do that as well. It's hard to do everything.
Right,
And
exactly.
Yeah, so I'm not positive, like what I want to continue to do. I know that I still find the new research really exciting, and I want to be involved in some way or another. So
Okay. And
yeah.
I'd imagine that, like I said, you're doing legal work right now.
Mhm.
That does actually like give you exposure to a lot of the new research then, right?
Yeah. So I get to hear about it before they even like publish normally because you want to get the
Right.
patent before you publicly disclose it. So that is interesting, for sure. And hearing, and it's a more for like the commercialization of it because you're trying to protect it from like commercial interests. Um,
Right.
but yeah, it's interesting. Um,
Okay. But
but
the field is
yeah, I
open to
got
you.
into it really randomly. I was like at the park with my kids, and a lawyer was there with his kids, and I was saying, "Oh, I think I'm like looking for some work in like some sort of like technical writing field." And he's like, "Oh, I probably could get you a job at my law firm." And so yeah, that's how I got into the legal field here. It's
Nice.
not what I thought I would be doing with my life. I thought I would be in the lab,
Right.
but now I want to spend a little bit more time with my kids, and bench work isn't as suitable to that.
Okay.
So maybe when the kids are older,
Sure.
but I haven't.
Sure.
But the law firm's working out great right now, and um, maybe I'll continue with that. I don't know.
Okay. So for those listening, Erica's got a whole set of skills, and for those that are just interested in the field, like you said, there's a lot of different options out there, and so people have even get your doctorate, like you have a field like a bunch of different still options available to you, places to use the knowledge that you have. So
Yeah, you can go lots of different directions.
right, right. Just to follow up, is so his name's Connor, Dr. Harper, I guess, and the work that he did was mass spectrometry. I just wanted to follow up for any of our listeners that have heard before and they can't believe that I didn't know what I was talking. It's mass spectrometry. That's what the work that he does. Anyway, but thank you, Dr. Handley, for coming on the podcast. It's been great. Biotechnology is a huge field, and I'm sure we just kind of cursorily touched on some of these subjects, but it's nice to have someone that actually knows what they're talking about and could give us some insight on these. So I really appreciate your time. And yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks. It was
Okay.
fun.
All right. Thank you. See ya.
Bye bye.